Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into some more fascinating insights about how our minds work.
Always ready for a good mental workout.
Today, we're taking excerpts from Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
A classic.
Seriously, it's like a user manual for your own brain. And one of the key concepts is that we actually have these two distinct systems of thinking.
Yeah, it's like having a dynamic duo up there calling the shots.
A dynamic duo that sometimes argues.
Oh, absolutely. They definitely don't always see eye to eye. And that's where things get interesting.
Okay, so let's break down these mental teammates. What's the deal with System 1?
System one, that's your fast, intuitive, automatic system. Um, think gut feeling. It's constantly scanning your environment, making those split-second judgments based on instinct and past experiences.
So it's like our autopilot.
Exactly. It's what helps you recognize faces, spot danger, those things that keep us safe.
Right, like when you slam on the brakes to avoid an accident, you don't even think about it, you just react.
Exactly. That's system one in action. It's fast, efficient, and often operating below the level of conscious awareness.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those times when we need to really think things through? Make a plan, solve a problem.
That's where system two steps in. It's the slower, more deliberate analytical system.
So System 2 is our thinking cap.
I like that. It's the one that helps you solve complex problems, weigh pros and cons, plan your next vacation, or remember where you parked your car.
Okay, so System 1 is fast and automatic. System 2 is slower and more deliberate. Got it. But here's the thing. If System 1 is so quick and efficient, why do we ever make bad decisions?
Well, because system one relies on these mental shortcuts called heuristics. They're like rules of thumb that help us make quick judgments.
Shortcuts. That sounds pretty useful.
Oh, they are, most of the time. Heuristics allow us to navigate our busy lives without overthinking every little thing. But here's the catch. Sometimes these shortcuts can lead to predictable errors in thinking, which we call cognitive biases.
Biases. So these mental shortcuts are like those handy GPS apps. They usually get you where you need to go, but sometimes they lead you down the wrong path.
That's a great analogy. Let me give you a classic example from the book, The Availability Heuristic.
Lay it on me.
Okay. Let's say you're planning a trip and trying to decide between flying or driving, even though statistically flying is much safer.
Right.
Those vivid images of plane crashes we see on the news,
Oh, yeah.
they make flying feel much riskier.
Totally. It's like our brains are playing a highlight reel of all the worst case scenarios.
Exactly. System one sees those scary images, equates easy to recall with more likely, and suddenly that long car ride seems like the safer bet, even if it's not statistically true.
Oh. So even though our intuition is often right, it can also be swayed by these biases, leading us to make irrational decisions.
That's the key takeaway. We have these two systems working in tandem, and understanding how they operate can help us make better, more informed choices.
This is fascinating stuff. So we've got these two systems, one fast and intuitive, the other slow and deliberate. And System 1 shortcuts, while often helpful, can sometimes lead us to make irrational decisions based on biases.
Precisely. And one of the most fascinating examples of this is what Kahneman calls the conjunction fallacy. He uses this thought experiment called the Linda problem to illustrate it, and it just shows how easily our minds can be tricked by a compelling story, even if it defies logic.
Okay, you've got me hooked. Tell me about this Linda problem.
So imagine you're given this description of Linda. She's bright, outspoken, majored in philosophy, and was really involved in social justice issues.
Okay, I'm picturing Linda.
Now, you have to rank the probability of different statements about Linda. Here's where it gets interesting. Most people rate Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement as more likely than Linda is a bank teller.
Wait, that doesn't make sense. Logically, it has to be more likely that she's just a bank teller than a bank teller and an activist.
Right. You're absolutely right. But the way Linda is described makes that more detailed, specific scenario.
Just feels more plausible, right?
Exactly. And that's the conjunction fallacy. We're seduced by a good story, even if it goes against basic probability.
So even though it's statistically less likely, our brains gravitate toward that richer, more detailed description. Like we can almost see Linda marching in a protest, right?
Exactly. We're hardwired to create these coherent narratives, these explanations that fit our worldview, even if they lead us astray sometimes.
That's a really important point. It seems like we need to be aware of how our brains try to create order out of chaos, even if it means filling in the blanks with assumptions or biases.
Yes, and this tendency to see patterns and create narratives is especially strong when we try to make sense of events that are influenced by chance, like like a winning streak in sports or a sudden drop in the stock market.
You're talking about that tendency to see causes and effects where there might not actually be any, right?
Exactly. And this brings us to another key concept from the book, regression to the mean. It's this statistical principle that explains why extreme events, both good and bad, are often followed by more average ones.
So it's like that saying, what goes up must come down. But it's not just some like mystical force at play. It's actually based in statistics.
Precisely. Let's say a student gets an exceptionally high score on a test. Statistically, they're more likely to score closer to their average on the next test, just due to chance.
Right.
But our minds, they crave explanations. So we might attribute that lower score to overconfidence or lack of effort.
Instead of just recognizing it as natural variation around an average.
Exactly. We overlook the role of chance and try to create a causal story, even when there isn't one.
So even when something is statistically predictable, we still try to come up with explanations, even if they're just stories we tell ourselves.
That's the human brain for you. We love a good narrative. And this tendency to create stories, even when they're based on incomplete information or hindsight bias, is what Kahneman calls the illusion of understanding.
The illusion of understanding.
We think we've got it all figured out, we understand how things work, but often we're just weaving these stories to make sense of the chaos.
So if our intuition can be so flawed, how can we make good decisions?
That's the million-dollar question. And luckily, Kahneman offers some practical strategies.
Oh, good.
He argues that while we can't completely eliminate our biases, we can learn to recognize them and take steps to mitigate their influence.
Okay, I'm all ears for any tips on how to outsmart my own brain.
One of the key strategies is to be more aware of what he calls the base rate, or the average outcome in a given situation.
So instead of just focusing on the individual details of a specific case, we should zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
Exactly. He suggests a four-step process for making more accurate predictions.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. But I think we'll have to save that for after the break.
Sounds good. Let those system twos take a breather.
All right, so before the break, we were talking about Kahneman's four-step process for making more accurate predictions. I'm ready to hear more.
Absolutely. So Kahneman uses the example of predicting a student's GPA based on their early reading ability.
Right, right.
The first step, as we mentioned, is starting with the base rate. Like, what's the average GPA at their school? That's your starting point.
Okay, so we're not just jumping to conclusions based on one piece of information. We're grounding ourselves in the average. What's next?
You assess the strength of the evidence you have. So in this case, how strong is the link between early reading ability and academic success?
So it's not just about the evidence itself, but about how well that evidence connects to what we're trying to predict.
Precisely. Then comes the crucial part. You estimate the correlation. Like, how well does early reading ability actually predict college GPA?
Okay, how do we figure that out?
You might need to do a little research, talk to some experts, or even just think about your own experiences.
Right, like how many people do you know who were like amazing readers as kids but didn't necessarily do well in college?
Exactly. And finally, based on that correlation, you adjust your initial prediction. Remember, we started with the average GPA.
Right, right.
You adjust it up or down, towards or away from the average, depending on the strength of the correlation.
So it's not about ignoring our intuition, but tempering it with a little statistical reasoning?
You got it. It's about fine-tuning our predictions based on both the evidence and how reliably that evidence predicts the outcome.
This is super helpful. It feels like a much more balanced approach than just going with my gut.
And the best part is, it's not just for predicting GPAs. You can apply this process to all sorts of situations.
Give me some examples.
Hiring decisions, evaluating investment opportunities, even choosing a restaurant.
Wow, okay, so it's like a mental checklist to help us avoid those snap judgments that might lead us astray.
That's the idea. And the more we practice this kind of thinking, the more skilled we become at recognizing our biases and making better decisions.
This is fantastic. It feels like we're taking control of our decision-making process rather than letting our intuitions run wild. But I have a feeling Kahneman has more to say about the limits of our rationality.
You read his mind. He actually dedicates a big chunk of the book to exploring overconfidence.
Overconfidence, isn't that like a good thing? Don't we want to be confident in ourselves?
Well, there's a healthy level of confidence. But overconfidence is when we overestimate our abilities and underestimate the challenges we might face.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely fallen into that trap before. It's like that, this will be a piece of cake feeling that often backfires spectacularly.
Exactly. And Kahneman argues that this illusion of understanding is especially strong in professions that deal with complex systems and uncertain outcomes, things like financial markets or politics.
So the people who are supposed to be the experts are actually more prone to overconfidence?
It can happen. He even shares a story about his own experience evaluating officer candidates in the Israeli army.
No way! He admits to making bad predictions, even with all his expertise in psychology.
He does, and it's a great example of intellectual humility. He and his colleagues thought they could accurately predict which candidates would excel in officer training,
Based on what?
their performance in this challenging group exercise. But when they compared their predictions to the candidates' actual performance later on,
What happened?
the correlation was shockingly low.
So even with all their experience and training, they still fell prey to the overconfidence bias.
It happens to the best of us. And it just highlights how, even when we believe we have a good understanding of a situation, there are so many factors that can influence the outcome.
Especially in complex situations where there's a lot of uncertainty, right?
Exactly. We often overestimate our ability to predict the future, even when we have what we think is solid evidence.
That's a humbling thought. It makes you wonder how much of what we perceive as skill or expertise is actually just luck.
It's a question worth pondering. Kahneman actually dives into this idea of the illusion of skill, especially in the world of investing. He argues that most investors, even professionals, can't consistently beat the market over time.
So those stock market gurus who claim to have a magic touch.
They might just be lucky. Their success could be due more to chance than actual skill.
It's like flipping a coin and getting heads 10 times in a row. It's possible, but it doesn't mean you have some supernatural coin flipping ability.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we shouldn't always attribute success to skill or expertise, especially when chance and randomness play a role.
Okay, so how do we differentiate between genuine skill and just plain luck, especially in fields where the outcomes are influenced by factors outside our control?
That's the challenge.
Hmm.
And it's something that Kahneman explores in detail. He talks about the importance of considering the track record of success over time, as well as the predictability of the environment.
So it's about looking beyond those flashy success stories and digging deeper into the data and context.
Exactly. It's about being critical thinkers and not just accepting things at face value.
This is all so eye-opening. It's like we're learning to see the world through a new lens, one that's more aware of these subtle biases and mental traps.
That's the power of Kahneman's work. It helps us become more aware of how our minds work so we can make more informed decisions and navigate the world with greater clarity.
This is fantastic. I'm already starting to apply these insights to my own life. But before we wrap things up, I'm curious to hear what overarching message Kahneman leaves us with. What's the big takeaway from all of this?
I think the most important message is that while our intuitive judgments can be flawed, they're also a vital part of what makes us human. It's not about abandoning our gut feelings altogether, but rather about developing a more nuanced understanding of their strengths and limitations.
So it's about finding that balance between trusting our gut and engaging our more rational, analytical minds.
Precisely. By becoming more aware of these invisible forces shaping our thoughts and actions, we can make more informed decisions, avoid common pitfalls, and navigate the complexities of life with a little more wisdom and a lot less bias.
This deep dive into thinking fast and slow has been a real eye-opener. We've uncovered those hidden biases that lurk in the shadows of our minds, and now we're equipped to step out into the world armed with this newfound awareness.
And perhaps the most valuable takeaway is this: knowledge is power. By understanding the quirks of our own minds, we can become better thinkers, better decision makers, and ultimately better navigators of this fascinating and complex world we live in.
So, dear listener, as you go forth into your day, I leave you with this question. Knowing what you now know about your two thinking systems, how might you approach decision-making differently in the future? Keep that question in mind and keep exploring the incredible world within your own mind. Until next time, happy thinking. All right, we're back and ready to wrap up our exploration of thinking fast and slow. You know, it's funny, as we've been talking about all these biases and mental shortcuts, I've started noticing them everywhere.
Absolutely. Once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them.
It's like a whole new way of looking at the world. And one of the concepts that really struck me was anchoring. It's just mind-boggling how a random number can actually influence our judgments.
It is fascinating, isn't it? It really highlights how much our thinking is influenced by subconscious processes.
You mentioned earlier how anchoring can play out in salary negotiations.
Right, like if an employer throws out a lowball offer first.
Yeah, what's going on there?
That low number becomes an anchor, even if you know it's way below your worth.
It kind of sets the stage for the rest of the negotiation, right?
Exactly. It can be really hard to break free from that initial anchor, even if you try to counter with a higher number.
So, what can we do to avoid falling prey to anchoring, especially in situations like that?
Well, the first step is awareness. Just knowing that this bias exists can help us be more mindful.
Okay, so if I'm going into a salary negotiation, I should be prepared for that initial anchor and not let it throw me off.
Exactly. Do your research beforehand. Know your worth. And don't be afraid to push back if that first offer feels too low.
That's great advice, and it makes me think about all the other ways anchoring might be influencing our decisions without us even realizing it.
Oh, it's everywhere. Shopping, investing, even just everyday conversations.
So the key is to just be more mindful of the information we're taking in, especially when it comes to numbers.
Exactly. And to remember that even though our brains are amazing, they're not perfect. We all have these biases, and recognizing them is the first step to making more rational decisions.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I've learned so much about how my own mind works, and I'm excited to start applying these insights to my life.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I think Kahneman would agree that the most important takeaway from all this is that while our intuitive judgments can be flawed, they're also a vital part of what makes us human. It's not about abandoning our gut feelings altogether.
Right.
It's about developing a more nuanced understanding of their strengths and limitations.
So it's all about finding that balance between trusting our gut and engaging our more rational, analytical minds. It's like we have these two characters in our heads, and we need to learn how to manage their sometimes conflicting impulses.
You got it. And the more we learn about these invisible forces that shape our thoughts and actions, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions, avoid common pitfalls, and navigate the complexities of life with a little more wisdom and a lot less bias.
Well said. This deep dive into thinking fast and slow has been incredible. We've uncovered those hidden biases that lurk in the shadows of our minds and explored strategies for making more rational choices.
And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to continue exploring the fascinating world within their own minds.
Absolutely. So, dear listener, as you go forth into your day, keep this question in mind. Knowing what you now know about your two thinking systems, how might you approach decision-making differently in the future? Until next time, keep those minds sharp and happy thinking.